So we're going to mostly have a discussion today, but I want to set the tone with this strange thing that I'm supposed to come in here for 50 minutes and teach you critical thinking. Critical thinking is this great phrase that everyone thinks is important. It shows up in every new fancy report on 21st century engineering education. It shows up on alumni surveys on what they wish they had more of. And then you push people and you say, what is critical thinking? And you get answers that really are all over the place. So I want to give you an operationalized definition that we're going to use sort of across the 3 years in each for how one way of thinking about critical thinking. And so we're going to frame it as the ability to move between different paradigms or frameworks for thinking about a problem. And I want to start with the framework that you already have most of the skills. So this is a set of exercises in bringing forward some things that you already have, and in some ways that education, as you specialize, makes it harder and harder to use. I'll talk throughout about the connection between critical thinking and engaged citizenship. The final unit in the senior year takes some of these questions and applies them to political action and political thinking. But I wanted to start out with just how to think about that, moving between paradigms and frameworks. How many of you have seen this image before? Since some of you haven't, can someone who has seen it explain what it is? Shoot.
It's either a rabbit or a duck, depending on if you look at it.
Exactly. And so there was a period where psychologists thought there were rabbit people and duck people. And that was the dominant way of thinking. I think it's more helpful to remember that it's actually something you can switch your mind between, thinking of this as a rabbit and thinking of it as a duck. And something training does is sort of teaches you to see rabbit or to see duck. And what critical thinking is about is just knowing that you can rotate between multiple ways of thinking. So it's sort of held in tension with the fact that you're becoming experts and you're specializing throughout your career. And you also want to remember that there are other ways of thinking and have some critical awareness of that. To give you a sense of how that type of shifting applies to questions of citizenship, how many of you are familiar with this image? Someone, what is it an image of? Moon landing? Yeah, what does it symbolize?
American dominance.
American dominance. That's one reading. Yeah, keep going. Anyone else? Other symbols? Colonization. Yeah. What else?
Scientific progress.
Scientific progress. These are different ways to look at the same image, right? It's not that scientific progress is the wrong answer and American domination or colonialism is the right answer. They are all, in fact, quite often associated with just this very image. And so there are different times where you give different answers. The autonomous machines thread, they have pictures of this all over. And it's not just out of some sense of patriotism, or maybe it has to do with their funders, but it's also about, they see this as a really great engineering accomplishment that they want to be proud of. So what STS does, which is the program I'm coming from, has anyone taken a class in STS? Which class?
Bioethics.
Bioethics, awesome. We were set up at MIT. We don't have a course number, so this weird hybrid program in science, technology, and society to help think about these questions, to help think about the politics that are involved in engineering. Because this, as you all pointed out, is not just an accomplishment of really great engineers who figured out how to get to the moon. It's an accomplishment of legislators who figured out how to get the funding for it. It's a political action. It's a colonial action. The PI for the work on this critical thinking thread, her work is a really interesting example of this too, where research that was military research was applied to civilian research, so to civilian urban planning processes. So the example on the cover is the way there was all this movement to create more suburbs as a way to prevent against the atomic bomb. Because if you were thinking in terms of a national security perspective, you're like, oh, we don't want all those people living in downtown Manhattan. Let's try and spread them out. And so there was a movement, and part of the push for suburbanization comes from people with military backgrounds encouraging suburbanization. So I am in the SDS program, which is where my expertise comes from and why I get to talk to you today. Before this, I was a public policy advisor in the Obama-Biden White House. I bring that up because I think these are the skills that are necessary and missing in public life right now, which is helping people move among different areas of expertise. And so I spend a lot of time over in CSAIL at the MIT Internet Policy Research Initiative, and if you have any questions about any of those things, I'd love to talk about them. But today, before we jump into the meat, for those of you who have to leave early, let me give you my gloss on what critical thinking is in practice. It's reading. There is no better substitute for practicing this skill, for building this muscle, than being stuck with an idea for longer than is necessarily comfortable. And the best way to do that is just to sit with a book. How many of you have time to read while you're MIT students? Yeah. My suggestion, carve out a little time. It's a really great thing. It's not going to be something that the institutional structures are going to really encourage. You're going to be overworked, but thinking about how to carve out those spaces where you sit and think with an idea. I often say that some of the best critics of science and technology are in sci-fi. So it's not like you just need a nonfiction public policy book to think this way and to do this kind of work. Okay, so to jump into the lesson, I just want to start off by doing introductions. And I'm going to ask you to give your name and an answer to the question of what people fail to understand about living machines, whether or not you think that's a real category, or biotechnology. So take it as whichever of the two is easier to answer, but take a minute if you want a note card to write down something. So let me pass these around. Jot down an answer, and when you're ready, let's start with you in the back in the gray, and then we'll snake around. So when you're ready, your name and something that people fail to understand about biotech or living machines more broadly. Whenever you're ready, kick us off.
Okay. Hi, I'm Susan, and I think one thing people fail to understand about, I guess, biotechnology in general, I think I see this a lot, especially when it comes to, I guess, either like GMOs or vaccinations, is there's this conception that, I guess, we're like messing with nature or interfering with, I guess, the natural order of things, putting like chemicals into food or into people and such, and that's how we get a lot of this, like, I guess, like anti-vax movements or like anti-GMO. And I guess when in reality, like, I guess people fail to understand the fundamentals of how these processes work and how I guess we humans have been like essentially messing with nature since as long as we've been in nature, so.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and I essentially said basically the same. But just the whole thing of genetically modified organisms, and you have such a wave of it now with the onslaught of synthetic biology really picking it up, and just like how GMOs are actually helpful towards the environment, how they're helping us reduce our carbon waste, and improving health and nutrition.
So something along those lines, that a lot of people, especially people outside of MIT, when they hear about like biotech, their impression is kind of linked to their impression of like, when they hear about big pharma on the news, so that all of this is kind of inaccessible to normal everyday people, and that like a lot of it's funded by malicious intent or something.
Sorry, can you remember your name?
Oh, Janice.
Janice. Awesome, thanks.
I'm Chelsea, and I kind of something similar. What I wrote down is there are a lot of ethical obstacles to overcome. I think like bioengineering, biotechnology is difficult because it does directly involve humans, and so with that comes a lot of like, is this okay? Is this not okay?
Awesome.
Amelia, I wrote something similar as well, but I guess like another thing I sort of added to that is that oftentimes people don't really know what is like currently possible to do versus like what is like speculation.
I'm Diana. I think people fail to really understand like the broad range of like problems that you could like possibly apply biotech to. I think a lot of it like focuses on like, you know, medicine, like healthcare technology, things like that, but it can really be applied to a lot of other fields like agriculture, possibly even like climate change.
I'm also Diana. I think that something that people fail to understand is kind of similar to what Camellia said, is like it's still a work in progress and it's not an instant cure to everything. I think sometimes people can be like overly optimistic about like what can be accomplished right now.
Absolutely.
My name is Lumen. It's something that is very similar to what of Diana. So I think people, they think biotechnology often only deals with improving humans' health, such as like targeting diseases and then finding a solution. But there is more than the human body, such as the environment and like fabrication of devices and things like that.
My name's Anita, and what I said was, I think it's sort of similar to what Diana said. People think like, oh, this research is so new and cool and like groundbreaking. But I think a lot of people fail to understand like how difficult it is to actually take that research, like how long the process is to make that applicable to like actually help people.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hi, my name is Melanie. I said like something similar to one of the Dianas as well. But I thought I think a lot of times people also like that like go beyond biotechnology as just also like a tool for medicine and drugs, but also like a field that's very interdisciplinary, meaning that it's not just people who are bioengineers, but also very much like a field that like involves other problems or other people being involved, and even like with like health problems, there's connections to like the environment that I feel like we don't often address. There's also just a lot of unpredictability, I think, in biology in general that makes it really hard to say for sure, like when you like make discovery that will have that same impact, I guess.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I think something people sometimes fail to understand is like how much we don't know and how much potential there is to keep growing it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was really helpful to me. I hope a lot of you said the same answers, but there were really interesting variations in what you said. There was one theme that I always find my favorite part about teaching at MIT, which is that MIT students are often the best critics of technology and the hype around technology. when I teach, and I've taught at Harvard for a number of semesters, and they're much more willing to buy into the hype about technology than MIT students. It's one of the things here that there was a big theme of like, don't believe the hype, and it's like why people who are doing some of the like, honestly, engineers are really good at knowing when systems don't work. And the same thing is true in the autonomous machines threads where people say, whoa, like full autonomy is not what's happening, like we understand, and I urge you to sort of hold on to the way in which being close to the machine makes you a really good critic about the machine. So what I want to do for the next little bit is, do you mind passing around? There's on the bottom there's a reading and on the top there's a worksheet. To old school go through a reading that gets at these big concepts of biotech. And I want you to take, oh, thank you. I didn't mean to make you.
So just like pass it.
This is a reading from 2016 by an STS scholar named Callum Stevens to give you a sense of an introduction to the concepts that some parts of the social sciences, some parts of the humanities bring to an analysis of biotechnology. So what I want you to do is work on the first two parts of the worksheet. So as you read, identify the concepts. They should be pretty sort of well spelled out. And then why that way of thinking might be useful. What is this concept good for? The concepts, then I sort of package them in these one-word terms, are helpful because they can reveal things that might be harder to see without the concept. So take 10 minutes and just sort of start working through just like definitions and why this definition, why this concept might be useful. And as you do, think about in the back of your head, like what type of reading this is, why you're starting with a story about Christopher Reeve. Think about what's going on, and we'll check back in once you've written. 5 minutes, what I'm gonna start asking you to do is come up and put your name next to whether you wanna present on a definition or why it's useful for one of these. I know it's kind of hard, this is easier to do with the whiteboard, but so, like, the definition of controversy or why, what that sort of concept helps us do. don't get to risk, don't swing it. But if everyone could put their name up there in the next 2 minutes. So about 20.
Are we left to, if you haven't actually got to?
If you feel comfortable presenting on it. Anyone else? You got everyone? Okay, here's what I want to do now. Just do this really rapid fire. So definition, why it's useful. So start with Jerry.
Complex and interactive set of elements that includes both technical and social things.
What does that mean?
That means it's including not just the test tubes that we do our experiments on, but the laws that allow us to use it to do the experiments.
Great. Diana.
I don't, this helps us see how like biotech is being viewed from like both the different sides, like the social aspect and like technical aspect. And it also helps us see like the limitations of each side, like what the social like side says that it should be limited and like what science actually says.
Awesome. Great. Co-production.
The production of the technology is not just based on science and technology, but also is influenced by the current political situation and social situation.
Awesome. Rachel.
So by understanding this, we can see better how society determines what technologies will be valued and developed faster, and in turn, what areas of society will be used by that.
Novelty.
So I think that's basically how new a technology is, basically like analyzing it in context of like the history of similar things.
Okay, nice. Why that's useful?
We can identify where the hype of a novelty is coming from. This can differentiate why is this technology like better or worse than past technology, but also we can control the hype by saying like, by making sure that the public understands what that actually means.
Nice. Where are we? Plasticity.
That might affect all the things that we engineer can be altered and continuously changed, and make question remaining like how much can be changed and stuff.
Nice. Diana.
It's important for thinking about like how it affects society in the sense of like how much can we change about people and how much would that affect the way that people live their lives.
Promise.
hype, speculation, and expectations that surround biotech, that is like necessary in driving the field forward.
Why do we?
Yeah, so it demonstrates like the connections between like how biotech presents itself because of the industry and like economics of it, but also like the connections with popular culture as to how culture is influencing people's perspectives on what biotech is and also influencing the questions and what debates people have about biotech.
Nice. Controversy.
Debate and differing opinions surrounding biotechnology, often kind of influenced by political views or religion.
Susan.
It's important because it not only allows us to discuss whether we should or should not do something, but also reveal some of the underlying conflicts behind these controversies.
Totally. So to underscore one of the points about controversy that I think that he's trying to make, that I think is a little hidden, but is like one of the things he's trying to do in this book is push back on the way ethicists often think about things in like should we or shouldn't we, in that controversy mode, and to say like there are actually all these questions about how we should do something, and so moving beyond the controversy is sort of part of the point. Any thoughts on risk? I'll speak to risk from a public policy point of view. It's where scientists and engineers often have the most trouble communicating with public policymakers because they either say, basically there's no risk, or it's a disaster. And so the failure to articulate these questions of plasticity or even the questions of promise in terms of risk create all sorts of public policy.
I'm actually wondering too, with regards to risk, because I feel like a lot of times scientists will like not like to be sure about things, like in the sense that like you use numbers maybe to explain your confidence rather than to actually say like yes or no.
Yeah, this is a big problem in the climate change space, right? Where like ambiguity, what little ambiguity there is there, has a really hard time translating into the political space. Because people don't know how to think about those types of risks that are totally different. But I think your point is very important, that scientific ways of talking about risk don't translate necessarily into public policy ways of talking about risk. So what I want you to do is pair up, or if it's easier, and pick one of these that you think is like the one that is the most exciting and new, and that you stand by as like a tool you want to take with you to think about biotechnology. So pair up and make a case, convince your partner, find someone close to you. I can pair you up if you need, but you guys take 3 minutes and duke it out. 2 minutes and duke it out.
Yeah, we think about technology trying, because they're like, that like, influence
Oh, but what this allows us to see is like
Yeah, so you had to pick one of these concepts as like the one that's like most new and most useful to you. I wasn't thinking that way because I was like doing my PSATs, but like it's really actually helpful for me to think about biotechnology in terms of promise because it helps me think about the way the market might be both investing in certain products. Something like that. take 30 more seconds. Okay, I want the groups of 2 to fight another group of 2 and duke it out between which concept wins in sort of a battle between the neighboring groups. So, compare. What do you guys have? Oh, no.
Whoa. But I don't know, just discussion like why do you guys think co-production? Like what were you doing?
Okay, controversy versus co-production.
The direction is given all of them, I guess, but then because there's a lot of co-production might have more limitations and also just like the culture of the production has unintended, like for people like the technology, like how, like what areas where you can try to apply their technology to is also like really influenced by the social like environment.
That brought up another thought.
What did you guys see?
Sometimes like, it's like unnecessary. Sure, like people, I don't want to say like, people just put so much time
like,
and
the
effort into like
reality
specializing in this one method.
But like
And
versus
then you
like the
think why,
expectations,
why
and
do
so
I
like keeping in mind like
what is
the idea
this
that cultural
this
images
technology,
and cultural
like,
fears
maybe
about
it has one
what we think
application, but it's
biotechnology
like
is might not align
only
with
one
what
application, but
biotechnology actually is.
maybe there are other more pressing
Yeah, where it's
problems.
actually going.
That stuff.
But like it's like the way in which technology and society research and then so without having like looking out beyond this make comments and people like anything else, make like what that's this research. And that's like the vehicle in which like socio-technological system like actually functions. But that's
We both said co-production. So now we're
Co-production.
just like-
This is, I thought co-production would be the controversial one. All right, can we finish up your thoughts and let's bring it back together for the last 5 minutes. So real quick, just to get a sense of the different conversation, can we just like popcorn around and just like give us a little taste of the conversations that we're having? Interesting tidbits. We'll do 10 people, like things in your conversations that were interesting, surprising.
So we said co-production, both of us agreed on co-production. And I think our emphasis on co-production is just that sometimes you have to be aware of more the social impact of what is going on in society and what has issues that needs to be solved. Because you may be working on one technology and you think, okay, this technology only like the reason I'm working on this is because I'm working in healthcare, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, this technology can maybe, if you're like more aware of the social, what's going on in the social sphere, you might be able to realize something that was unexpected, that if it does get produced, it goes on towards agriculture, or she said like urban planning, or like.
Exactly. You need to be aware of the society in which you're creating a technology and how it's going to shape that and how that mutual relationship is going to happen. Other thoughts, interesting parts of conversation.
We also looked at reviews on exactly what we were arguing because we felt that they were very much overlapping. Because, for example, we had like, co-production and controversy pitted against each other in the sense. But then it's interesting because we thought about like co-production and controversy very much is in the process of co-production, like necessary in the sense of like how do you evaluate when you're thinking about evaluating the context of like social and technical. You have to like really have that controversy to like really discuss the solution and whether or not it's going to be a good technological solution that you can bring up. And like on the other hand too, like with controversy, you need the co-production because you need the aspects of both of them. It's not just one aspect.
Wonderful. I couldn't have, there's like 6 books that articulate less effectively the relationship between co-production and controversy. So you guys just got it all right here, right from the source. Other thoughts?
We had socio-technical system pitted against promise. And it's funny because we both chose them for similar reasons in that we were looking at how does society's expectations of technology influence the technology that's produced or the way that it's used. And so it was interesting that kind of shows two different things, but both of them sort of.
Both
Had
for
the
the
same
same kind of
idea.
reasons?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So the point I really want you to take away from is that these ways of thinking, these sort of critical thinking tools, are not these like really foreign entities that are incredibly hard to wrap your head around at first, but they're really useful tools to sort of keep thinking with and use them to like follow through the steps. And even in your conversations today, which were pretty brief, you went to a whole bunch of like the next level of what you can do with them. So what I want to do to wrap up is just do an exit question, which you can either write on the back of your sheet, or if you're in a rush, feel free to just email me. But I want you to think about how these concepts could or might be helpful to you over the next couple of years, sort of as you're a NEET student, as you're becoming a biotechnologist or a living machinist. And so write 3 to 5 sentences. Again, you can write it on your sheet, or you can just email it to me. These are the questions that are guiding STS research and thinking. So if you want more ways to think about them, not only are there STS classes, but feel free to email me and I can sort of point you towards some ways of thinking about them and resources so you can keep being good co-productionists.